On a bright, bustling day at a local diner, golden sunlight fills the room as a young boy witnesses an unusual scene. An elderly couple is reprimanded by a strict manager for misplacing their wallet. Risking trouble, the boy quietly covers their bill, sparing them further distress. Later, retracing his steps, he finds the lost wallet and returns it, only to discover that the couple is, in fact, generous millionaires. Little does he know, his small act of kindness will soon intertwine their lives, setting off a chain of life-changing events. The air inside the mid-range restaurant was thick with the mingling scents of grilled steak, buttered vegetables, and freshly baked bread. Plates clattered against polished wooden tables, silverware scraped against porcelain, and a low murmur of conversation wove through the warm, dimly lit space. Ethan sat near the entrance, elbows propped on the table, stomach tight with hunger. The laminated menu sat in front of him, the words blurring together as his eyes darted to the plates that passed by in the hands of busy servers. His mouth watered at the sight of golden brown fried chicken, steam curling from mashed potatoes drenched in thick brown gravy. His fingers twitched. The money in his pocket was just enough for a meal, but he knew better. That money wasn't his to spend. It was for his mother. 14 years old and already carrying the weight of decisions most kids his age never had to make. Ethan swallowed hard and folded the menu shut. He exhaled, willing the gnawing hunger to quiet down. One more hour. Maybe two. He could wait. He was here to meet Lucas, his friend who worked in the back kitchen, finishing up his shift. Ethan's eyes flickered toward the cash register, where a pale-skinned couple, well-dressed, rings flashing on their fingers, counted out bills with ease, laughing between themselves. He looked away. Then the shouting started. A voice, sharp and edged with impatience, cut through the hum of the restaurant like a knife. If you don't have money, you don't eat here. Ethan's head snapped up. At the far end of the restaurant, a table had gone silent. A waitress hesitated nearby, her notepad clutched to her chest, as if unsure whether to stay or go. In the center of it all stood Rick, the owner, a heavy-set man with a face lined from years of scowling, towering over two elderly customers. The couple looked startled. Evelyn clutched at her scarf, Henry patted down his pockets with trembling hands. They were black. Rick sneered, his voice rising for everyone to hear. Let me guess. You thought if you sat down, ordered a nice meal, nobody would notice you couldn't pay. He let out a short, humorless laugh. I don't run a charity here. Ethan's stomach twisted. Evelyn's voice shook. Sir, we had our money. We must have dropped it somewhere. Please, just let us step outside and retrace our steps. We promise. Rick cut her off with a snarl. Yeah, sure. Like I haven't heard that one before. His gaze swept the restaurant, looking for support. First it's, I lost my wallet, then it's, oh, please let me work it off in the kitchen, like a movie scene. His lip curled. You people always have a story. You people. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. One man in a suit shook his head and muttered something under his breath. A woman dabbed her mouth with a napkin and glanced away. Ethan's nails dug into the wood of his table. Henry, still searching his pockets, let out a shaky breath. It must have fallen out when we got out of the taxi, Evelyn. Rick scoffed. Oh, a taxi. Wow. So you had money when you got here, huh? But now it's just magically gone. Convenient. Evelyn's voice cracked. Please, sir, we'll find it. Just give us a moment. Rick leaned down, his shadow swallowing them whole. You hear that, folks? They just need a moment. Maybe we should all dig into our pockets and see if we can help out, huh? He turned back to them, dropping his voice low enough that only those closest could hear the venom in it. You think because you're old I won't toss you out on your asses? Ethan shot to his feet. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound slicing through the tense silence. Heads turned. The pressure of 100 eyes settled on him, but he didn't care. His heart pounded, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't think. He just moved. Stepping forward until he was between Rick and the couple. "That's enough," Ethan said, voice steady despite the fire burning in his chest. Rick's brow twitched. He straightened, arms crossing over his chest as he looked Ethan up and down. "Oh, great. Now we got a little hero." Ethan held his ground. "You don't need to talk to them like that. They didn't mean to lose their money." Rick's laugh was slow. Deliberate. "What are you gonna do, kid? Lecture me on respect?" Ethan didn't waver. "They're not trying to scam you." Rick's eyes darkened. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Rick's lips curled, something cruel sparking behind his eyes. "Oh, I get it now." He took a step forward. "You feel bad 'cause they look like you, huh?" His voice was low, but everyone could hear. "That's it, isn't it? Sticking together." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Rick smirked. "Tell me something, kid. You planning to pay for their meal? 'Cause if not, I suggest you sit back down and let the grown folks handle this." Silence stretched between them. Heavy. Suffocating. Ethan exhaled through his nose, pulled his hand from his pocket, and slapped a crumpled wad of bills onto the counter. The money he had saved for his mother's birthday. The money he had spent months collecting, little by little, doing odd jobs, skipping snacks at school, holding back when he wanted something for himself. All of it. Rick stared at the cash. Ethan's voice didn't shake. "Now you don't have an excuse." For the first time, Rick hesitated. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, he swiped the money off the counter and stuffed it into the register. "Fine," he muttered. "But don't come crying when they play you for a fool." Ethan didn't even acknowledge him. He turned to Evelyn and Henry, their eyes wide, their expressions unreadable. Evelyn's hands trembled as she reached for his. You didn't have to do that, dear." Henry swallowed hard. "We could have figured something out." Ethan gave them a small, tired smile. "Everyone needs help sometimes." Evelyn blinked fast, then quickly pulled out a napkin, scribbling something onto it. "Our number. Please, if you ever need anything." Ethan took it, nodding. They left quietly. The restaurant hummed back to life, people pretending nothing had happened. But Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the napkin in his hand. The weight of what he had done settled in his chest. The weight of his decision sat heavy on his chest as Ethan left the diner that night. His hands were tucked into his pockets, his breath visible in the cold night air. He kept his gaze down, his mind racing. The echoes of Rick's mocking words rang in his ears. "You people always have a story." The humiliation. The anger. The exhaustion. His stomach clenched as he walked the long stretch home. He thought of his mother, waiting for him in their small apartment. He had nothing left to give her for her birthday. No surprise. No cake. No little piece of joy in a life that had already taken too much from them. The weight of that reality pressed down on him with every step. When he finally reached home, the dim glow of the kitchen light spilled into the hallway. His mother, Isabella, sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. She looked up when he entered, and immediately, her brows furrowed. "Baby, what's wrong?" Ethan hesitated, shifting from foot to foot. For a brief second, he thought about lying. About pretending everything was fine. But his mother always saw through him. She always knew. So he told her everything. As he spoke, Isabella's grip on her mug tightened. She didn't interrupt. Didn't react. She just listened. When he finished, she let out a long, slow breath and set her tea down. You gave them everything you had. Her voice was quiet. Not angry. Not disappointed. Just, understanding. Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, to his surprise, Isabella smiled. It was small. Tired. But real. You know what the best gift is, Ethan? His throat tightened. I was supposed to buy you something nice. You did, she said softly, reaching across the table to take his hands. You helped someone who needed it. That's worth more than anything you could have wrapped in a box. Ethan wanted to believe her. He really did. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, doubt gnawed at him. Had he really done the right thing? He had given away everything. And now, he had nothing left. The next morning, the knock on the door startled them both. Sharp. Firm. Unexpected. Ethan looked up from his bowl of watery oatmeal, his spoon clattering against the side. His mother frowned, pushing her chair back. Who could that be? She moved toward the door, hesitation in her every step. When she pulled it open, she froze. Evelyn and Henry stood on the other side, framed in the dim glow of the apartment hallway. Evelyn's eyes softened the moment she saw Ethan. Oh, sweetheart. I had a feeling we'd find you here. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. How did you? The police called, Henry said, stepping inside. His gaze flickered around the small apartment, taking in the frayed couch, the stack of overdue bills peeking from the counter, the thin blankets folded neatly on the chair. His lips pressed together. They said a young man turned in our wallet. We knew it had to be you. Isabella glanced between them, then back at Ethan, her brows knitting together. What's going on? Henry reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded stack of bills. He stepped forward, holding it out. Ethan's stomach twisted. No, he said quickly, shaking his head. I didn't do it for money. Evelyn chuckled. Oh, we know that, dear. That's exactly why we're here. Henry's expression grew more serious. We didn't just come to return the money you gave us. We came because we saw something tonight. And we need to ask you something important. Ethan frowned. Ask me what? Evelyn looked at Isabella, then back at Ethan, her eyes gentle but firm. How would you feel about a fresh start? The words felt too big. Too impossible. Ethan looked between them, searching their faces for some kind of explanation. Some hint that this was all a joke. But there was only certainty in their eyes. Isabella stood frozen beside him, gripping the fabric of her sweater. I don't understand, she said slowly, her voice careful, as if afraid to hope. What are you saying? Henry exhaled. We know what you're going through. He looked at Ethan. We know what you've sacrificed. Not just tonight, but for a long time. Ethan stiffened. How? Evelyn smiled softly. Because we asked. Henry nodded. After we left the restaurant, we made a few calls. We asked around. Your friend Lucas was more than happy to tell us about you. Ethan's breath caught. He told us how you've been working small jobs after school. How you've been saving every penny to help your mother. How you go without so she can have a little more. How you never ask for anything, even when you need it. Henry's voice softened. How you were willing to give up the only money you had to help two strangers. Ethan's stomach twisted. He shifted on his feet, suddenly self-conscious. Isabella's voice was quiet. Why would you do all this? Evelyn stepped forward. Because, my dear, we aren't just an old couple who lost their wallet tonight. She glanced at Henry, then back at them, her lips curling into something soft, but knowing. We are, in fact, quite wealthy. Ethan blinked. His brain stalled. Wealthy? Millionaires, Henry said simply, as if it was the most casual thing in the world. Silence hung heavy in the room. Isabella sucked in a sharp breath. Ethan barely moved. Barely breathed. Henry sighed, running a hand over his chin. We don't usually tell people that up front. It complicates things. People act differently when they know. His gaze met Ethan's, glinting with something fierce. But tonight, we met a boy who didn't hesitate to do the right thing, even when it cost him everything. A boy who expected nothing in return. And that, Ethan, is rare. Ethan's heart pounded in his ears. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had spent his whole life watching people with money move through the world like it owed them something. He had never imagined standing in front of people like Evelyn and Henry, and hearing them talk about him like he was the rare one. Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. What exactly are you offering? Evelyn's gaze softened. A new beginning. Henry nodded. We want to help. A proper home. A stable future. A chance for Ethan to go to a better school. To have the opportunities he deserves. And for you, Isabella, we can make sure you have work that pays you what you're worth. No more struggling. No more worrying about how you'll keep the lights on. Ethan felt his breath hitch. He thought about the past few months. The eviction notices. The sleepless nights. The whispered conversations his mother didn't think he heard. He swallowed hard. Why would you? Because we can, Henry said. Evelyn smiled. Because we should. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, then let out a long, shuddering breath. When he opened them again, he met Evelyn and Henry's gaze. Raw. Unguarded. Okay. Ethan barely heard the words as they left his mouth. Okay. It felt too small. Too simple. It wasn't enough to capture the storm raging inside him. Henry and Evelyn exchanged a knowing look, as if they had expected this moment, as if they understood exactly what was going on inside his head. Isabella, on the other hand, was frozen. Her hands trembled slightly, still gripping the fabric of her worn sweater. This is too much, she whispered, shaking her head. Henry tilted his head, studying her. Is it? His gaze flicked around the tiny apartment, the dim lighting, the second-hand furniture, the envelope on the counter stamped final notice in red. His voice softened. Or is it just enough? Ethan's chest ached. He thought about all the nights he had seen his mother sitting at this very table, her hands in her lap, staring at an overdue bill like she could will the numbers to change. He thought about the mornings she had left before sunrise, working shifts that never paid her what she was worth. He thought about the way she always smiled at him anyway. Always told him things will get better. But they never did. Not until now. Isabella let out a shuddering breath. She turned to Ethan, searching his face. Baby, she whispered, her voice breaking, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. His throat tightened. For so long, it had been just the two of them. Just survival. One day at a time. No room to dream. No room to hope. But now, for the first time in his life, Ethan could hope. He looked at Henry. At Evelyn. He took a deep breath. Okay. Evelyn's face lit up with warmth. Henry nodded, satisfied. Then let's get started. The next few days were a blur. It felt like something out of a dream, one Ethan kept expecting to wake up from. Henry and Evelyn wasted no time. By the end of the week, they had arranged everything. A new apartment, bigger, brighter, in a safer neighborhood. A new school for Ethan, one with better teachers, better opportunities. A job for Isabella, one that paid her well enough that she wouldn't have to work 3 shifts just to scrape by. Ethan still couldn't believe it. Standing in their new living room, looking at real furniture, real space, real comfort. It felt wrong. Like he didn't deserve it. Like he was borrowing a life that didn't belong to him. "You're not used to good things, are you?" Ethan turned. Evelyn was watching him from the doorway, her expression kind. He swallowed. I don't know how to be here." Evelyn nodded. She stepped closer, resting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to feel that way, sweetheart. But you belong here. You earned this." "I didn't earn anything," Ethan muttered, dropping his gaze. Evelyn sighed. "Ethan, do you know how many people would have walked away that night? How many would have watched what happened in that restaurant and done nothing?" He said nothing. "But you didn't," she continued. "You saw injustice. You saw cruelty. And instead of looking the other way, you stood up. That is why you are here. Because you have the heart of someone who changes the world." Ethan's chest ached. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to hold back the lump rising in his throat. Evelyn gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You belong here, Ethan. Don't ever doubt that." School was the hardest adjustment. Ethan wasn't used to private schools. He wasn't used to fancy uniforms and kids who had never worried about their next meal. The halls were bigger, the classrooms quieter. The teachers expected more. The students whispered when they thought he wasn't listening. "Is he on a scholarship? Did you hear? He used to live in the projects. Why is he even here?" Ethan kept his head down. Until he couldn't. It started with a math test. A teacher handing back papers, murmuring words of encouragement as she placed them on desks. "Excellent work, Amanda. Well done, Michael." Then she reached Ethan. She barely glanced at him as she slid the paper onto his desk. "Better than I expected." Ethan stiffened. Better than she expected? His jaw clenched. He looked down at the test. An A. And yet, she still sounded surprised. He wanted to be angry. He was angry. But more than that, he was tired. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of proving himself over and over again. Tired of people assuming he didn't belong. He thought about Evelyn's words. "You belong here." And for the first time, he let himself believe them. So he straightened in his seat. Lifted his chin. And when the next test came, he didn't just pass. He got the highest grade in the class. Months passed. Ethan worked hard. Harder than he ever had. He studied late into the night, determined to take advantage of this opportunity. He helped his mother with bills, refusing to let her carry everything alone. And slowly, he stopped feeling like a stranger in his own life. He started making friends. People who saw him for who he was, not where he came from. He started to dream. Not just about surviving. But about thriving. And then one day, an idea took root in his mind. A crazy, impossible idea. He went to Henry and Evelyn's house one evening, his heart pounding as he sat across from them. "I want to start something," he said. Henry raised an eyebrow. "Something?" Ethan took a deep breath. "A scholarship. For kids like me. Kids who are smart, who work hard, but never get the chance." Silence. Then, slowly, Evelyn smiled. "Tell me more." Years later, that small idea became the Ethan Foundation. A program designed to help underprivileged kids get the education they deserved. A chance to break the cycle. A chance for a better life. It started with one scholarship. Then another. Then 10. Then 50. And every year, Ethan made sure to sit down with each student. To hear their stories. To tell them the same words Evelyn once told him. "You belong here." Because he knew, better than anyone. That sometimes, all a person needs is someone to believe in them. Just like Evelyn and Henry had believed in him. And just like he would keep believing in others.